We got breaking news. The Trump administration halts all appointments for student visas.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Seculo. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Logan Seculo.
Welcome to Seculo. This is Logan Seculo. Will Haynes is joining me. CC Heil's going to be on a little bit later. And Rick Grenell. We have some top topics to go through today. And phone lines are open for you at 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. News keeps coming all the time, and it feels like another controversial moment that will happen. There's some good, there's some bad, there's somewhere in between. And that is the President Trump administration has halted all appointments for new student visas. This is ahead of what they're calling expanded social media vetting. I want to get your thoughts on this. Obviously, the left not thrilled about this. The right probably somewhere in between. There becomes a line of when we start tampering with free speech. What are we doing here? However, Will, this is to keep out a lot of the issues that they've had in the past, which is actually spending time on new media and finding out who these people are before they're allowed to become students in our country. I think that is okay. I think that the arbiter of that is going to be a bit fishy, because if right now it's the Trump administration's crew, next time when it is a more liberal crew, because we know the pendulum swings, it just happens. What does that mean? That's my only concern really looking into this, which is, well, what does it mean for not necessarily just liberal? You wouldn't even say these are liberal talking points. What they're really looking for is what you'd hope for is like terrorism.
That's right. And so what this practically does is puts on hold this student visa process while they revamp and change the way they do the vetting for these visas. It's not as if they were not vetting the individuals coming in already. That's a part of the process. To get a visa, you go through a vetting process. You have an appointment for this. So what they're looking at is revamping the program to change what they look for, knowing that a lot of students here on foreign exchange type visas, foreign visas for student purposes, what they're doing is looking through and saying, oh, a lot of these people were in the middle of these pro-Hamas protests, calling for genocide, echoing the talking points of Hamas and things of that nature. So they're looking at a better way to vet these individuals, to make sure they're not missing anything, not making sure that they're not coming in and trying to subvert the American Constitution, the American way of life, American values. And yes, it does bring up questions that I think we will get into in the next segment about the Constitution, free speech. But one thing that, if you've listened to this broadcast for a long time or been around, constitutional law and talk, you know that it's a well-known quote that the Constitution is not a suicide pact, meaning that the liberties that are given by God and protected by the government under the Constitution does not mean that you can assure your own destruction through those liberties, and that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. There are limits
what are the
to the consequences.
I think we have to make sure we build those parameters and make sure that they're safe. I think that is always a concern when you start saying this speech is good, this speech is bad, this speech is allowed, this isn't, because like I said, when that pendulum shifts, when that pendulum swings, and all of a sudden it's not a conservative president, it's not a conservative administration, now all of a sudden our conservative talking points, or what's considered hate speech, or what's considered speech that will not be allowed in our U.S. universities. You got to be careful with all of this. What do you think? 1-800-684-3110. Once again, 1-800-684-3110. We're going to continue this coverage as well as some updates what the ACLJ is doing, not only in Israel, but in the Congo. I know you've seen Congo's been making a lot of news, really horrific things going on there, and our ACLJ team is very hard at work. Rick Grenell is going to be joining us later on, and we're going to continue to take your calls. Once again, though, as we've seen those attacks on Christians around the world increase, together we know we can win, and we've been winning all around the country. We're going to break down some of those when we get back. We're going after some HOAs, Will. I know people love that. People love to hear that we're going after your HOAs. Everyone's shaking their head yes. Support the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org. We'll be right back.
President Trump's crackdown on international students is intensifying, his administration ordering embassies to stop interviews for student visas as the State Department prepares for an expanded social media screening for applicants.
This is just a temporary pause, according to what a U.S. official told the Associated Press, but it would represent another escalation in the administration's efforts to push back against elite universities and colleges.
The president certainly had great concerns that there are foreign students, not everyone, but there are foreign students who come to this country, I do believe, who help create this unrest. There are activists who come in. I think there are professors that are hired and brought in who are teaching ideology more than they are the subject matter that perhaps parents who are sending their students to these universities expect.
We will use and have been using every tool in our tool chest to make sure that we know who it is that wants to come into this country and if they should be allowed to come in.
I don't know what the criteria that the State Department is looking at. I'll leave that up to them. But certainly having an understanding of what students are coming into our country, what professors are being hired, what their backgrounds or ideologies might be, I think is a fair assessment to bring them on campuses here to teach the students who are going to the universities here in our country.
Every sovereign nation has a right to make sure that they know who's in their nation and if they are safe to be here, and for the people who want to come to understand that there are expectations when you get here so that we don't have to take your visa and remove you. We want to get this right at the start, and that's what our consular offices, our embassies are doing. And if there's any kind of delay or any kind of framework, it is because of the nature of vetting. And, of course, people are encouraged to continue to apply and take the steps they normally would, and that America is serious about making sure we know who you are and why you want to come here.
Welcome to Seculo. Welcome back. Phone lines are open for you. You know, I'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this as the Trump administration has put a halt to all new interviews for student visas as they kind of recreate what the standards are, including doing a deep dive into social media accounts of potential applicants? Do you think that's good? Do you think that's bad? Of course, you look at it from our point of view as if currently with the Trump administration in charge, you go, okay, good. Hopefully they're stopping out terrorism. They're stopping things coming to this country that are threats to our American way of life. However, you also have to think about the long-term ramifications of this and what does it look like when the other side is in control. What becomes that speech? We all went through that on the social media side of this. I think that's maybe why. Maybe I have some PTSD from the years of being censored and having to every day feel like we were having to be very, very careful on the words you could or couldn't say, and having to make sure that we are fighting back against big tech and big social when they were coming after us. That goes, okay, now the government's looking into it. Current administration, I think I'm probably okay. But let's say, down the road, you have a different administration, but they've built these standards. What's that look like? We also want to talk about some of the work of the ACLJ. Well, I know that we had a motion to dismiss that we were able to overcome, and it's against a lot of people's favorites. The HOA, the Homeowners Association in your neighborhood. Look, I have to say, maybe I'm part of the deep state because I was a member, I was a vice president for many years. Yeah, but the deep state, when you're talking about HOA, is a good thing because, the HOA bad. So if you're deep state, you're like Rebel Alliance. Yeah, but I was like a yes man to the president. I was whatever. Then you're just full on whatever bad. The president wanted, I was like, repave those roads. That's fine with me. I don't care. Charge them extra 50 cents. Raise them rates. I mean, it was so negligible. Trust me, we heard about it. Should those people have a pool? I don't know. Do they deserve it? They already have one. How do they need a second pool? How many kids they got? Who needs that many pools? All right. But ACLJ-wise, there is obviously always pushback with the HOA, but this HOA was specifically targeting a Bible study that was going on in a neighborhood. That's right. So the bottom line on this is that there was discrimination by this HOA of who could use the clubhouse for events, gatherings. They were saying that a group could not meet because it was a Bible study. This is a violation of the Fair Housing Act and the Constitution. So we did what we normally do with HOAs because typically it's pretty easy to get resolved, send a demand letter and say, hey, you can't tell this person they can't have a Bible study if you're allowing other people to use the clubhouse. Normally, the HOA is like, okay, fine, whatever, they can use it. Not in this case. They were
very firm against it, said we will not allow this activity, so turned into a lawsuit, went to federal court, and just yesterday got an order from the judge. Last week was when the hearing was scheduled and all the briefing was due, and we already have an order from the judge denying the motion to dismiss from the defendants in this, which would be the HOA and the group representing them, and saying that this can proceed. So they tried to get it thrown out of federal court, and congratulations to Garrett, who this is one of his first cases that he has written the brief on, is leading, one of our attorneys here, and has already survived the motion to dismiss. So congratulations to him. The fight's not over. We still have to push back, and we have to make sure that precedent is set in federal court that this isn't allowed. We know that there's plenty of precedent in this, all the way to the Supreme Court, about not discriminating against people for their religious beliefs and who can use that. Viewpoint discrimination by an HOA is a violation of the law, and that's what we're seeing, and that's what we're fighting back against in the state of Virginia, but anywhere this pops up, the ACLJ is there to push back. And you can get help as well. If you have a similar issue, aclj.org/help.
That's right, aclj.org/help. You just fill out a really simple form, and you'll get connected to an ACLJ attorney immediately. We've heard from a lot of our people who've come in and said, hey, we're expecting months to go by. Maybe we'd get a correspondence. Maybe we get a call from a telemarketer, in some sort of call center. But no, within hours, most of the time, within hours, if it's within scope, you've been connected to a lawyer who is attached to your case at absolutely no cost to you. And that's because we have great ACLJ supporters and ACLJ members who donate. You can donate today at aclj.org. We appreciate it. If you become an ACLJ champion, that's someone that gives on a recurring basis. No, we would really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and take a phone call. I want to go to Jerry, who's calling in Rhode Island. Jerry, you're on the air.
Hello, team. This morning's comment in regards to the background vetting of people seeking visas for educational or visiting purposes. Those of us who are older, Medicare age, we all remember when people coming here strived and studied and sought the privileges and rights to become a member, and then therefore to get the privileges and protections of the amendments. Why are we applying those sought-after amendment privileges to people who want to come here and visit and maybe not have an intention of becoming here, and therefore they bring their ideas and ways here with the intention of trying to change here? No, don't come change here. If you want the privileges here, adapt to us. Why do we not hear much about that anymore?
Jerry, very valid points, and I think that is part of what the administration is doing. One, a little bit of nuance in my take and on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is that we don't believe that the government gives these rights to Americans. We believe they're God-given rights. These are human rights, the right to free speech, to freedom of religion. It's not the government that gives us these rights. It's God that gives us these rights, and that we have protections in the amendments to ensure the government doesn't violate our God-given rights. But our God-given rights don't come without consequences as well. And once again, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. It doesn't mean that we have to ensure the destruction of America through the Constitution and the freedoms that it gives. And it's not like vetting students here on visas is new. This is just changing and updating the program. And when you know that they were looking into who their contacts were, how they were, what they did in their communities, things of that nature. That's how you vet incoming visa applicants. If social media vetting wasn't a part of the visa review process, that is shocking. And if it's just them changing it, there shouldn't be much of an issue here. But I know that the left will file lawsuits. We know that Representative Jayapal, who is the chair emeritus of the Progressive Caucus in the House, she tweeted this or posted on X. This will hurt America and Americans. Hope someone inside the administration has a brain and shuts this down. But she's like-minded with the Chinese government, who has put this statement out saying that China upholds that normal education cooperation and academic exchanges should not be disrupted. We urge the U.S. to effectively safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of all international students, including Chinese students overseas. Just so everyone knows that there was roughly 400,000 student visas issued in the year 2024. Of those, 398,000, so over half, were from China. So China has a vested interest in this.
Of course.
And we know that the Chinese regime, the CCP, it is finding ways to infiltrate the United States, whether it be through education, through the Confucius Centers, through their consulates. We know that the Houston consulate was shut down by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo because it was an espionage center. So when you're
hidden police stations,
when more
New
than
York.
half are coming from China, and the Chinese government are the ones that are the most upset and speaking out like, whoa, let's safeguard the legitimate rights of people here. Maybe
that's a sign that
they're
you're doing the right
right
thing.
thing.
Yeah, maybe that's a sign that you're doing the right thing. What do you think? A lot of you haven't called in yet. We've got a few people on hold, but come on. I feel like this is an important free speech question that I really want you to ask, or want you to answer. I want to ask you. 1-800-684-3110. 1-800-684-3110. These are the ongoing conversations we have here at the ACLJ. How we get involved, what we get involved, and we don't do that without you, because we want your advice as well. We want to hear if this is something that bothers you, if this is something that you like, something you don't like. Where does free speech land? We know that you don't necessarily always toe a party line. You don't always support one thing from one administration or everything from one administration. So what do you think about this? Sure. Do we think social media should be involved in vetting people coming into the country? Why not? It's probably your easiest access point to the thoughts and the feelings of people coming into your country if they have an active social media presence. However, again, when the tide turns, what's that look like? Give me a call, 1-800-684-3110. And look, in our lifetime, I would assume that we will see the tide turn, as it always has. We have always seen a flip-flop. Most of our lives, we have seen a flip-flop between Republicans and Democrats, whether it's every other term or sometimes every term. It has not been consistent. So what does that look like when there is a Democrat in office? Coming up, CeCe Howell's going to be joining us. We're going to talk about our updates here at the ACLJ. We're fighting hard for Christians around the world. And of course, we may be talking and joking around a little bit earlier about the HOA, but of course, that was a serious thing. We were able to take that to court. But we are also talking about people that are being killed for their faith in other places in this world, including in Congo and around the world. And we also talk about our support of Israel. We're going to discuss that with CeCe Howell. Some new filings that the ACLJ and the ECLJ team have been doing. Be a part of this right now. Go to aclj.org and support.
This month, Israel stepped up its offensive against Hamas. It intends to take control of 75% of the territory by midsummer. One goal is to find and release the rest of the hostages, 58 in all, but 23 believed to be alive.
President Trump sent his Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to Israel.
I'm here to meet with the Prime Minister and visit with him about specific security concerns and what the United States can do to continue to support Israel and their security.
Israel is letting in more aid trucks. The Israelis said that more than 300 aid trucks had been allowed into the Gaza Strip just this past week. But Palestinian officials and the United Nations said that little more than 100 had actually gotten in. Now, we heard from the Secretary General of the United Nations. He said that this amounted to just a teaspoon of aid, and he said that to meet the needs of the more than 2 million people in the Gaza Strip, that 500 to 600 trucks of aid are really required.
Palestinians in Gaza are enduring what may be the cruelest phase of this cruel conflict, all with the world watching in real time.
Security is a big issue here, guys. The World Food Program said that 15 of its trucks carrying flour had been attacked and looted by armed gunmen.
The United Nations has been a big part of the problem in Gaza for a very long time under UNRWA and other organizations, where they've embedded themselves with Hamas and with the kind of people that Israel is trying to eliminate there. So having somebody other than the United Nations do this is probably a good call. We'll see how that part plays out about having a family member receive the food, but there's probably some risk to that for sure. But the other risk is to continue to feed and arm and empower Hamas operatives who take that that aid from the families in the first place.
Welcome back to Seculo. We have one line still open. Look, a lot of you called in. Some of you made it. Some of you didn't. I apologize if you didn't, but there was some reason. They're going to tell me later why. 1-800-684-3110. What could you have possibly said to that phone screener that made him lose your call? I'm very curious. All right.
You used to screen the phones,
I
Logan.
did.
I think you can figure it out what could have been said.
It was the most fun job.
Yeah.
It was way more fun than this job.
The best is when people realized that it was
me.
Logan Seculo.
I would say, next. Because I got to get my aggression out.
Yeah.
Because people call in and say some wild stuff sometimes, man. My favorite call ever, I always bring this up, is someone called in who's like, I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but stranger things have happened. And I started thinking, what stranger things have happened?
And I think I've thought about that quote every day of my life.
I know.
Since it happened.
It's a great comment. Okay. Cece Hiles joining us, senior counsel here at the ACLJ. We're going to shift to a more serious tone here because we are talking about whether it is the ACLJ getting involved in a case where a homeowner association is going after a Bible study. Sure, that is going after Christians in America. We have to make sure we're there for them. We're protecting them. Our attorneys are on it. But we also have to look at the worldwide crises that are happening. We know Congo has been in the news a lot recently, and not just on this issue, but also even on some of the mining issues, some of the issues they've had there in terms of the batteries in your cell phones and what the conditions are for them to be able to get those materials. We know that it's rough in Congo for the people there. But we also know it's particularly tough right now for Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we just submitted 4 reports to the Human Rights Council. It's their 59th session, and we always submit reports documenting the human rights really record of the countries that we think are the most in violation of Christian.
Let's talk about the Human Rights Council real quick. For those who don't know, what is that? What is that board? Where does it exist?
Sure.
I think we talk sometimes in the world that we all know.
Right.
But maybe our listeners don't understand. What's the Human Rights Council? Why does that exist? Where is it? Is that in Congo? Is that in the UN? Where are
That's
we?
right. So the Human Rights Council is a subsidiary of the United Nations. And so it deals with all the human rights issues that come before the United Nations, and it sits in Geneva. So that is where the Human Rights Council sits. That's where the sessions are held. There are 3 each year. We go there very frequently. I was there just at the last session. And so this session, it's the 59th session, and we always file reports. We always do oral interventions. We filed our reports, and we highlighted 4 countries. The 5th will be Iran. That's not due yet. But we highlighted Israel, India, Pakistan, and Congo. And you were just talking about Congo. Congo is the 35th worst place for Christians to live, even though it's a majority Christian country.
Right.
And it's the Democratic Republic of Congo, because there's actually 2 Congos. So it's the DRC. But in the eastern region, it's a very, like you said, minerally rich region. And there are a lot of factions that are fighting there. Unfortunately, the ISIS is not dead. And there is ADF, which comes from Uganda. That's a actual arm of ISIS. It's called ADF. And they have been targeting the Christians in that area in Congo. And we've reported about it many times, about the 70, just recently, the 70 Christians that were beheaded in a church. So it is horrific attacks. There are thousands and thousands of people, actually, I think millions of people that are displaced. And we just hosted our European Center for Law and Justice just hosted a delegation from Africa New Day that lives there in Congo. We took them to the European Parliament, to the European Commission in Belgium, and hosted and allowed those people to tell their on-the-ground stories of what is going on the eastern part of the DRC.
And Cece, as you mentioned, our European delegation was able to meet with them. Jordan is actually with our ECLJ right now with other meetings. He'll be joining us actually from Europe soon on the broadcast. So you'll get to hear about the work he's doing with some major announcements for global free speech that he's working on over there. But we also talked about, in one of our filings, Israel. Mm-hmm. And I think this ties in with the work that ACLJ has to do consistently. If you look at the UN as a vector for lies and anti-Semitism globally about Israel, about the Jewish people, and we even saw that horrific attack last week where 2 diplomats were murdered in D.C., assassinated after leaving an event by someone with radical anti-Semitic, anti-Israel views. And that's a major part of the work we have to combat at the UN, is making sure that our voice is heard to combat that anti-Semitism where it really starts. It starts in many cases at the UN, because all these nations that hate Israel, that hate the Jewish people, are able to spread hate, lies, and use this global body as their platform for it. And what we're doing there is actually combating twisted anti-Semitic, anti-Israel logic that's come out of the UN recently. And it's very important because there's not a lot of allies to the Jewish people at the UN. And that's why it takes the United States and groups like the ACLJ and ECLJ to stand in the gap.
Yeah, absolutely. The United Nations has more resolutions condemning Israel than any other country in the world. They have 193 countries, and we are talking bad players. We're talking North Korea, China, all those, but they don't get condemned as much as the UN condemns Israel. And so the ACLJ is always there through our ECLJ, European Center for Law and Justice. We are always there defending and protecting Israel. And so this was a time where we got to point out there's a commission of inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, and they had a terrible report basically saying, they were saying that Israel had basically committed all these crimes only because they had pointed out the crimes that Hamas had committed. There wasn't one bit of evidence that Israel had committed any crime, because they don't, and they haven't in this situation. And this whole entire report by this Commission of Inquiry was skewed and totally erroneous, and we were able to point this out in our filing.
The twisted logic was that the horrific crimes against women, children that took place, we're not going to go into the details, but you know what happened on October 7th. Mm-hmm. That because Israel spoke out against it and pointed out the real horrific crimes against individuals on October 7th, that they were using that violence against the Palestinian people. It defies logic that it's Israel's fault that they called out and showed the world, here's how bad Hamas and depraved Hamas is. It's Israel's fault for showing the evidence of the crime. That's what we are fighting back against. Say, no, you don't blame Israel for that. They pointed out the crime. They're showing you how depraved Hamas is. They're showing the world the truth. They aren't the perpetrators of that violence. They are the victims of it and have every right to show the world this horrific just atrocities that were committed by Hamas.
Absolutely. And phone lines are open for you. We got one line open as we head into this second half hour of Seculo. Some of you lose this, but you heard CC, you heard Will. This is the incredible work the ACLJ team is doing. It's not just about a show or a broadcast. That's great. We got to have the best of the best in the media team as well, because we know that the media side can reach a lot more people even than the legal side can in terms of people understanding the issues, of being able to understand why we're doing the things we're doing in court. So the media side, very important. But our legal team, I mean, you're talking about flights, you're talking about all the travel that goes into it. That alone needs your support financially. So as we head into the second half hour, consider supporting the ACLJ. Consider becoming an ACLJ champion. You do that very easily on ACLJ.org. You can do it very easily on the ACLJ app. We have a second half hour coming up. If you don't get us on your local station, find us broadcasting live on social media, YouTube, Rumble, ACLJ.org, and the Salem News Channel. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Logan Seculo. I wanted to take a moment to thank our ACLJ champions. Even with the new administration in power, the attacks on our faith and our constitutional freedoms are not slowing down. Help us continue fighting for life, liberty, and justice. Thanks to the courageous monthly support of our ACLJ champions, we're able to take on hundreds of cases every year, fighting and winning. Last year alone, we handled 126 deep state cases, plus 175 pro-life matters, 197 free speech cases, 142 religious liberty cases, and 152 legal letters and briefs defending Israel. But we can and must do even more. The left is fighting to bulldoze pro-life laws. They've openly said they want to silence your free speech. Now, with the new Trump administration in office, we are ramping up our fight to shut down the deep state's agenda. That's why we need you now more than ever. Join our team of champions. Donate monthly now at aclj.org.
Keeping you informed and engaged. Now more than ever. This is Seculo. And now your host, Logan Seculo.
Welcome back to Seculo. We do want to restate, because a lot of you are just joining us here on this second half hour of the broadcast. If you missed the first half hour, you can find it archived later on, by the way, on the ACLJ app, on the podcast feed, on YouTube, however you get that, of course, at aclj.org. But, Will, the top topic of the day is that the Trump administration has halted student visa appointments. It's new appointments ahead of some changes they're going to have in the vetting system, including expanding the look into people's social media. Obviously, probably the easiest way to find out if they have public social media, to find out who these people are, what they're thinking, what their thoughts are. Again, there's some good and bad that can come from that. Of course, from this current administration, you're hoping is they're searching for terrorism. They're searching for things that really we do not want in this country. Understandably, though, I can see how that can get weaponized against people. And we got to make sure that we are careful with that. We got a lot of calls coming in about it as well, and we're going to take those, maybe one in this segment, but definitely going to take some in the last segment. So if you're on hold right now, stay on hold. We will do our best to get to all of you coming up, because Rick Grenell is going to be joining us in just a moment. We're going to continue the conversation with him about this and some updates from him at the Kennedy Center.
That's right. You want to take a phone call while we're in this for a second? Let's go ahead and go to Taylor from North Carolina on line 2.
Come on and raise up.
Listening on the radio. Taylor, you're on Seculo.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I'll try not to say anything too wild or scandalous while I'm on the air here.
That's not a good start, Taylor. Let's just, Yeah,
how to make us nervous right off the bat.
You didn't have to even say that. You could have just not. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Taylor. But no, go ahead.
Well, just looking for a little education here on our Constitution. But this kind of ties into an ongoing discussion we've been having in our family. It pertains to the halts on the student visas.
Sure.
So how does the Bill of Rights extend to non-citizens in terms of free speech, due process, not just in the event that they commit a crime here, but how do we include those God-given rights?
Right, Taylor, because we almost Americanize everything.
And there's kind of two ways to look at it. Philosophically, what I was talking about earlier, where it's a God-given right. It's not the government that gives it.
It's a God-given right enshrined in the Constitution.
I believe everyone has the God-given right to free speech, freedom of religion. That doesn't mean that it's protected everywhere, right? So, but in the United States, it is enshrined in the Constitution, protected here through our judicial system. You can raise claims about that. You can petition the government for redress of grievances. These are things that we have the opportunity to do here. If you are not in the United States, not on a visa, if you are just a foreign student that is trying to come here, you don't have those constitutional rights protections that you could immediately go to court over. Now, some may try. There are novel legal theories that go in there. But the vetting process is established. We vet refugees, are supposed to. I mean, these processes exist. So vetting someone before they are allowed to come in, you don't just apply for it and they rubber stamp it. That's not the way it's supposed to work. It may have worked that way under previous administrations, but if they are here on a student visa, there are potential claims that they could raise within due process rights and things of that nature. What this is doing, and this isn't even canceling student visas, that's a different issue altogether. This is just saying right now, no new appointments for student visas while we rework this vetting process. And so if someone is denied it, I think we are likely to see people try to go into court on this. I think a lot of those could get thrown out, depending on the jurisdiction, just based off the fact of you weren't afforded this visa yet. Therefore, you cannot claim a U.S. constitutional right. You're not in the United States. You're not here on a visa. So we'll see how that shakes out. It also depends a lot on the jurisdiction that it's brought here. But these individuals would not have in the U.S. court system, theoretically, the rights to due process under our Bill of Rights and Constitution because they aren't here yet and they don't have a visa yet.
What he said. Phone lines are open for you. We've got two lines open, 1-800-684-3110. 1-800-684-3110. We're going to take all the calls we can in the final segment of the broadcast. But before then, we're going to be joined by former Director of National Intelligence, Ambassador, and our good friend and member of the ACLJ team here, Rick Grenell. We got some big updates about this, of course, the student visa situation, and an update from the Kennedy Center that you're going to enjoy hearing. Again, phone lines are open for you, 1-800-684-3110. Welcome back to Seculo. We are going to take your calls coming up in the next segment at 1-800-684-3110. We're going to continue the discussion about President Trump and the new Trump administration plans to put a pause on student visa appointments as they expand vetting, including social media. We're going to talk about that. Is Rick joining us? We got Rick. Our friend Rick Grenell is on the phone right now, of course, head of the Kennedy Center. And Rick, I heard some news about the Kennedy Center. And look, people know me. They know I love the entertainment world.
Of the arts.
I'm a patron of the arts. Really, I am. And Will said, did you hear what Patti LuPone said? And I said, of course. I follow all these news.
I thought that's the only push notifications you got.
I know that. I get that and those things. And I said, Rick, to double down on this, I actually saw Patti LuPone perform with Lin-Manuel Miranda. So it is the double hitter for Rick Grenell. And I just wanted to check in because she made some pretty outlandish statements, Will.
Yeah, that's right. The New Yorker did a profile. So I that's another magazine that I know you read religiously, Logan. You always take the New Yorker. But in this profile of Patti LuPone, Rick, she said, here's the quote from the article. She's even angrier at the rest of the country. She told me more than once that the Trumpified Kennedy Center, quote, should get blown up. Rick, thoughts? How do you respond to that?
Look, it's truly outrageous, threatening violence and saying that the Kennedy Center should get blown up. Look, we've had already a bomb threat at the Kennedy Center a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. These are very real things. The President of the United States was shot at, and another person tried to shoot at him, Donald Trump. And so I think that we have to take this very seriously, this left-wing radicalism that is morphing into left-wing violence. It's radical. It's intolerant, especially coming from the crowd that, pretends to be the tolerant crowd, the one that wants diversity. They don't want diversity of thought. They can't even perform without complaining when a Republican is in the crowd. Certain shows. Lin-Manuel took the show that he created and said, we're not going to perform for Donald Trump or Republicans. And look, I think we've got to take these warnings from these people seriously. If the musical Hamilton does not want to perform for Republicans, then I think that every theater across the country needs to understand when they book Hamilton that they have a cast and they have producers that are going to pick and choose who they want to perform for. This is outrageous. It's intolerant. It's a new low, and it's coming from the crowd that somehow is saying that we're intolerant at the Kennedy Center. We haven't canceled anybody. Let me also say Harvey Fierstein, who took to Facebook and did this whole victimhood and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm being banned from the Kennedy Center." Within minutes, I went out on social media and I said, "Listen, Harvey, you're not banned. As a matter of fact, you're not only not banned, bring one of your shows to the Kennedy Center. Bring one of your big blockbuster shows. He's got a couple of really good ones. Why don't you bring them to the Kennedy Center? You're welcome to come here." But they can't do it. They can't be in rooms where they're surrounded by people that they disagree with politically. Patti LuPone in particular, an amazing voice, right? An amazing talent. But she has decided that she can't perform for people that she doesn't agree with politically. She wants the Kennedy Center to be bombed. And this is the type of thing that when the media ignore it, when the left ignores their radicals calling for violence, when you ignore it, it gives the next person comfort to say it louder and to take another step.
You have to give it somewhat to the New Yorker for even saying, hey, she said this over and over again. We got to make sure that we include this in this article. This wasn't like an offhanded thing. It kept happening. So you know what? I guess give it up for that reporter a little bit. I haven't read the full article, but the article saying, you know what? She kept saying this, and it maybe made them uncomfortable as well. And you talk about that, Rick, and you talk about that they don't want your money, they don't want your patronage. I mean, I've seen Hamilton 3 or 4 times with my family. I think it's obviously wonderful. But when you start doing this to your own audience, but look, that happened. Look, it happened to me. I was a season ticket holder here at one of our theaters. I'm not going to call anyone out. And I got banned, and I called them, and I had to have these conversations, and they said, we don't know why, but we had your account flagged. And they kind of told me why, which was my name was a little recognizable, and somebody in the ticket office wasn't too thrilled that I was one of their patrons.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what's happened.
I think that we've got to call it out when we immediately see it, because it's going to get worse. It's going to, we just suffered through cancel culture from the Biden administration, from political prosecutions, and this is an intolerance. This is literally saying you and I disagree, and so I'm going to destroy you, cancel you, bomb you, and we can't have that. I mean, I don't understand why the media are not more focused on Patty LuPone's threats and calls for violence, because it is a serious threat, not because I believe that Patty LuPone is building a bomb to take it to the Kennedy Center, but because she's giving aid and comfort to somebody who is unstable, right, who will say, Patty LuPone, who I love, wants me to go do this. She's giving me permission to go do this. She has to understand the power of her words. They're very dangerous. We need to take them very seriously. And I'm calling upon our friends on the left, my friends on the left, to stand up and condemn this immediately before it gets out of hand. We keep seeing left-wing violence, and we cannot allow this to continue.
Rick, before we let you go here, I wanted to get your take on this. This is that the Trump administration is pausing new student visa appointments while they restructure their vetting process. It's nothing new that visa applicants are vetted. Refugee programs are vetted, or at least are supposed to be, depending on which administration it is. We're already starting to see outcry, but one of the most interesting sources of this outcry of how dare they vet student visas is coming from the Chinese government with this quote: "We urge the U.S. to effectively safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of all international students, including the Chinese students overseas." I think, to me, that quote proves exactly why there needs to be expanded vetting of student visas in this country. What are your thoughts on it?
Look, I have been running in the past. I have run the visa line for the embassy in Berlin and for our consulates in Frankfurt and in Munich. We take all of these issues very seriously. There's a vetting process. We look at people's social media. If you are on social media complaining about the U.S. government's policies before you get a visa, you're going to be denied a visa. This is just the fact. We don't want troublemakers coming into the country before you even have a visa. And so the strict policy of are you coming to be a tourist and be a student and learn, or are you coming to actually foment, political violence or problems, is a very real thing. And by the way, there are hundreds of thousands of people waiting in line that want to come here on a student visa. We get to pick and choose because our universities are great and people want to come here. And so we should take only the cream of the crop. We don't need to take the troublemakers. And this is what other countries do. You couldn't go and get a visa to go live in Germany if you were critiquing the government of Germany and calling for violence or chaos against the German government. They're not going to give you a visa. This is just common sense.
Of course, Rick, and I think that is common sense for a lot of people joining us. And look, in the next segment, we're going to take your calls and comments. What do you think about what Rick just said? Rick, number one, I want to say I appreciate you. I appreciate what you've done for us here at the ACLJ. I appreciate what you're doing at the Kennedy Center and what you're doing for the Trump administration and for everything right now and getting involved in. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to hear about what's going on there, as you are such a big proponent of the arts and a big proponent of all of this. It's really great to hear that you guys are continue that fight on. So we appreciate it. In the next segment, again, I want to hear from you. There are two lines open for you at 1-800-684-3110. So Tiffany, Sue, Kathy, Ronald, stay on hold. We'll get to hopefully a couple more, even if you give us a call. You've heard about our fight for Christians around the world. And of course, it goes from an HOA to the Congo, the DRC, where Christians are being persecuted and murdered for their faith. No case, though, is too small. If you need help, you got a problem with your HOA like with the religious freedom situation, give us a call. Go to aclj.org/help. We'll get you in touch with an attorney immediately. We'll be right back with your calls. The FBI deciding to probe into a couple of, I guess you could say, cases that were closed, but were almost cold cases. They had nowhere to go. So 3 of them from the Biden administration. The one that's obviously that we're looking at the closest is the leak of the Dobbs decision. That was the overturning of Roe versus Wade. You may remember that came out months before the decision was actually made. An early draft of that decision was leaked, and the Supreme Court announced a few months later that they were not able to locate anyone or find out any information about how or when it was leaked or how it got leaked. But the new FBI, led by Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, and Dan Bongino made a statement about this, said, that's not good enough for us. We would like to do an FBI probe. Now, it opens up a lot of doors, whether they can actually do this or not, as the Supreme Court, kind of can dictate its own future in that sense. But maybe they'll welcome this because we'd like to see some answers. That's all we're looking for. I think that's what they're looking for as well. It's not necessarily that this is criminal. We're not even sure what the rules are, the laws are in that in terms of that situation, but someone should be held accountable if they can be located. So the FBI decided to reopen that.
Really what it shows is that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel at the FBI are looking into things that seem to almost get swept under the rug to some degree. They were big national stories that when you have the resources of federal law enforcement, you'd think you'd be able to get to the bottom of fairly quickly. And this is what Dan Bongino said on X over the weekend about this update. And it says, shortly after swearing in, the director and I evaluated a number of cases of potential public corruption that understandably have garnered public interest. We made the decision to either reopen or push additional resources and investigative attention to these cases.
Welcome back to Seculo. Phone lines are jammed right now, so we're going to get to as many of you as we absolutely can. Let's go first to an ACLJ champion, Tiffany, who's been on hold still for 33 minutes. I know I bumped you to the front of the line, but you still had to wait, and I'm sorry about that. But Tiffany, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to talk and share my thoughts. I had a question. So I know that there's a bunch of lawfare going on and this ridiculous situation with federal judges just halting the American people's will for getting rid of all these illegal immigrants. Is there an opportunity for the American people to raise funds, let's say a GoFundMe like they did in Canada with the truckers, get ACLJ to support a lawsuit and sue these governors and these mayors that are holding sanctuary cities, which are endangering the local citizenry, as well as going against the specific decrees from the White House that you cannot harbor these fugitives, especially if you have a situation where they are now raping and murdering in these towns.
Tiffany, so a couple things here. One, good news would be the ACLJ wouldn't need a GoFundMe because we have ACLJ champions and donors. And we have a way to go do that. You go to aclj.org and there's a donate button. And we are funded by members of the ACLJ, by donors, by the champions that give us that recurring baseline. So we wouldn't even have to go through a third party to be able to provide this type of legal work. The other part of that question would be, though, is you would need a client. We couldn't just, on our own accord, just go and sue. The ACLJ sues San Francisco or Boston or something like that. There would have to be a client, and that client would also have to have a claim that is provable, that would survive on the merits, that would survive motion to dismiss, that has real harm that we could prove in the court to try and push back. The Department of Justice has different angles where they can sue over the way the different separation of powers between the federal government and the state governments. So that can be taken by the federal government. But for us as the ACLJ to represent a private party, it would have to be a provable claim that there is harm against an individual. And sure, we understand the harm of the community harm, but there are different levels and different bars you would have to reach within the legal system to actually be able to take that case to federal court. But it's a great question. One also can highlight that you don't need a GoFundMe to support the ACLJ. You can come here directly, and we do fight for individuals free of charge in the court, and we have so many expert lawyers, some of the best in the business, and that's what we do here every day. And they analyze cases like that every day to see which ones are meeting those bars that we can get into court and can actually sue to make a real difference for the American people and the clients themselves.
All right, 5 minutes, 5 calls. Let's see if we can do this. Let's first go to Sue, who's calling in Texas on line 2. Sue, you're on the air.
Hello. Thank you so much for taking my call. I listen to your show daily. Y'all are excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to make you aware that it was over 6 months ago that I heard, I was listening to a talk show that did from a biblical worldview. They were interviewing an ex-Muslim jihad. I think he was a captain. He was going to university at I just forgot.
Go ahead, Sue.
UCLA. And then he became a born-again Christian.
That's great.
And he was making America aware, the audience, through this talk show, that there has been for years Muslim jihad coming through our student visas, and
Sue, I think we got what you're saying.
And Sue,
we'll have a response
to your point as well. I mean, the education system, especially higher education, has been the doorway in for many bad actors to the United States, whether it be the Chinese Communist Party, who funds these universities extravagantly, whether it be Qatar, who is the top donor to U.S. higher education, whether it be the Muslim Student Association, which was the American branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Yes, using American education has been the doorway in to try and get a foothold for bad actors. Yep. And I think what we're seeing here is trying to undo some of that harm.
Look, I got to call something out real quick that's happening in the chat. There's a lot of people saying I'm not taking a certain person's phone call that I yelled at on the air yesterday because I got he's not on hold. So, look, sir, I know you're an ACLJ champion. I know you're a supporter. Phone lines are closed for the day because we only got 3 minutes and 4 calls. But you never called. You say you called. But I don't want people to think that I'm some sort of coward, Will. Let's go ahead and continue on. Ronald's calling South Carolina on line 4. Ronald, quickly, you're on the air.
Yeah, sure. As a couple of callers ago had outlined beautifully about the vision of America, which was to give me your huddled masses yearning to be free, and how they came to literally start a new life, to make this country their home. But nowadays, there are those, as you have already mentioned, that are just here to literally have little sleeper cells and startup groups and stuff like that to try and attack and break and tear down. This nation is a target now for many of the criminal elements of the world. But the problem is also the fact that we have so many politicians who are wearing the American flag on their lapel and saying and doing everything they can to hurt this country instead of helping the
Ronald,
country.
a lot of it is just to stay in power and become politically popular.
Well, and once again, Ronald, we many times think about the Declaration of Independence and the language in that, but the preamble to the U.S. Constitution says that in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution. So it's very America-focused. It's not world-focused. It's about protecting the common defense, ensure domestic tranquility, and I'm certain that if social media posts are against that, maybe that doesn't line up with the U.S. Constitution.
Let's try to get Kathy real quick. The other two, I'm sorry, Susan and Ray, we're just not going to be able to get to you. You weren't on hold that long, so I don't feel as bad, but still. Call me back tomorrow. We'll try to get you up early on. And call me, Pat, actually, if you want to be on the show tomorrow. Kathy's calling. We'll be here. Will you? Kathy's calling in Kentucky on line 3. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. Trump is the president we need right now for his leadership, and he does acknowledge that God has a part in his life, but he also is not prideful in such way that he cannot listen to reason from others. And we need that to get our constitutional republic back on track.
Kathy, thank you so much for calling. I appreciate all the people who called in today and everyone that supports the work of the ACLJ. We only have 45 seconds left on the air today. I just want to encourage you all, if you have enjoyed this broadcast, even just that alone, I know you know about our legal work, all the incredible work that our team is doing, the best of the best out in the world, whether that's through the ECLJ, through the ACLJ, through ACLJ Jerusalem, all of it incredibly impactful. But we know that this show alone reaches millions of people each and every day. We can't do that without you as well. If you like this show, if you've been watching for years, if you've been watching for months, it's an easy way to support. We're not funded by big sponsors. We're not funded by big donors. All of it, almost all of our funding comes from individual donors that give on either a recurring basis or just a one-time gift. Doesn't matter if it's $5 or $500. Know how much we appreciate it. We want to keep this content free and available and not behind a paywall. So go to aclj.org. Be a part of this journey with us today.